We've heard from two Democrats, the Minority Leader Dick Gephardt and from David Bonnier of Michigan. Bob Franken, it sounded as if there were people applauding. We couldn't get a look at how big a crowd there was outside.
Just about everybody who was on the lawn running around us just a moment ago surged over to the area. Let me tell you where we were and where they were. We are at the Elm Tree site, it's called. It's an area where broadcasters operate. It's on the lawn. They went over to what's called the Triangle, so named because it's a little three-sided patch of grass, and they went to a place where, in fact, cameras could broadcast live, and now they're heading back. They made their point. You can probably see them raising their hands in triumph, although they're coming out to complain about a defeat on the floor. And they're going back now to the very, very serious business of considering impeachment. Article 1 is the matter that's being decided on the House floor right now, and by all accounts, that's the strongest count of impeachment, the one that is considered most likely to win. That is the one that charges that President Clinton perjured himself before the grand jury on August 17th. Article 2 comes up after that. That's perjury alleged in the Paula Jones case. Article 3, obstruction of justice, and Article 4, the abuse of office charge, which is based on the President's 81 answers that he provided to Congress. So all of this now is coming to a head in a day that can only be described using words like bizarre, like nothing any of us has ever seen. Judy?
A remarkable picture, Bob. These Democrats moving en masse up the steps of the Capitol with the clock showing a little more than 8 minutes left to vote on the first of these articles of impeachment. We did hear, Bob, there were some boos in the crowd, so presumably it's not just a bunch of Democrats outside.
No, as a matter of fact, I'm it's quite unusual to me that it's been as friendly as it has around here, because there are any number of people who are carrying impeach Clinton signs, others who are carrying signs that say such things as impeach the Republicans of Congress. I mean, there are two sides represented here, and for the most part it's been very, very friendly, I think due in great measure to the fact that there are an awful lot of policemen around here.
Bob, as we watch these Democrats stream back in, at least some of them, it looks like a few of them, Jerry Nadler and some others are there turning around to look back at the crowd. Will we see a pretty rapid succession of votes here? Will there be any more parliamentary moves or anything else to interrupt the flow of business at this point, or is it 4 articles, 4 votes, and then they're out of here? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, I don't expect that we're going to see any more parliamentary impediments to the votes on articles of impeachment. I think that there's going to be a view as they go back in that this is a very, very serious historic circumstance, and I think that they're going to stop that. That is not the end of the legislative day. One of the other things that they have to vote on is the appointment of the managers of impeachment. That is the team of, in effect, prosecutors that will follow Henry Hyde, the Judiciary Chairman. There are going to be 13 in all, who are the ones whose job it is to prosecute the case when it goes across the Capitol building to the Senate side to the trial, which if the president was convicted in that trial would result in his removal. Of course, there are an awful lot of things that can happen between now and then. That, as a matter of fact, is where many people believe it is more appropriate to talk about censure, to talk about what amounts to a plea bargain in the context of a trial.
Well, certainly Henry Hyde, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, felt that way earlier when he went to the well of the floor, and he described censure as being, in his words, that is impeachment light. Censuring the president is not a function permitted in this chamber, maybe across the rotunda, Mr. Hyde said. Across the rotunda, correspondent Candy Crowley.
Bernie, sitting here watching and remembering what a lot of people that are outside this business and outside the business of politics are saying to me, and one is that they can't figure out whether this is like a historic drama or a three-ring circus, and I think what we have here is the answer, and it's both. Inside the chamber, you have an article of impeachment being brought against the president, being voted on. Outside, you have a collection of all the Democrats who are going to vote against that article around the microphones, and all of these people with signs. Talking to a couple of people as we stand out here because they go by and they're holding their signs. I'm told that there was a 3-hour wait today for those who wanted to get into the actual gallery and see history unfold or watch the circus, whichever one you want to call it.
I suppose part of the long wait was due to the extra security precautions up there in the Hill.
There are indeed extra security precautions up here, but those have been in place for a couple of reasons. You remember we had the tragic shooting of 2 policemen up here, and security has been heightened since then. This has been more about fences to kind of keep people away from the front of the building, but really basically people can go pretty freely in and out of the building. They just can't get into the gallery quite as quickly.
Candy, have you heard of any initial Senate preparations?
On the Senate side, I know that the Senate Majority Leader and Minority Leader Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader, Trent Lott, the Republican leader, have talked to each other in person and on the phone about what if, and we're very close to now what. And now what is that there is an agreement by both men that a trial of some sort and of some duration will have to take place. There will be things that take place before that, but both agree that a trial under the Constitution is what's warranted here and what, in fact, must take place. That doesn't mean that there won't be many people out and about in the Senate trying to put together some kind of deal. There is initially going to be a sort of a mini book that the Democrats and the Republicans will circulate among their members, which will tell them, okay, here's what you can expect and here's how this is supposed to go. And in the meantime, both Trent Lott and Tom Daschle has spent the past week or so reaching out to their members to try to get a sense of things. Remember, they're scattered to the 4 winds, so it takes a while to do that.
Candy, it's Jeff Greenfield. Are the Democrats planning to take any comfort or make any political point out of the narrowness of the margin? It appears it's going to, Article 1 may pass by about 10 or 11 votes to spare. Is there any argument that you think they're going to make that proves the partisan nature, that it was lame ducks that provided the difference?
I'm not sure what, how on the Senate side they'll feel about the lame duck, and I'm not sure they'll take to that argument. But they're certainly going to continue over here what you have been listening to on the House side, and that is this is partisan and this is unfair. And I think you'll hear that. But as you well know, Jeff, the Senate is full of 100 people, all of whom think they could be president, and all of whom have their own minds. And I think you will see more crossover here. But I don't know if it'll change the mix. I think you will see some Republicans who maybe will want to work a deal, and I think you're going to see some Democrats who maybe think that a trial ought to go through and who might in fact vote for the ouster of the president. So I suspect that there will be a little more bipartisanship, but probably not much.
For the first time in 130 years, on the floor of the House of Representatives, there is a vote to impeach a sitting president. They're voting on Article 1 with less than 3 minutes remaining in this vote.
And Bernie, at this point, there are 3 votes shy, and we have every reason to expect it's at 217 and at 218 when that number comes up.
Here it is.
There it is. President William Jefferson Clinton is now the 2nd president in the history of the United States to be impeached by the House of Representatives. The members having voted on the first article declaring that the president committed perjury before a grand jury.
And on this lip-quivering afternoon, we go to John King at the White House.
Bernie, inside, they're watching this vote. They knew the president would be impeached, but still, this is stunning for everyone here at the White House to see. As they ponder this, they don't have much time to reflect, much time to air their sadness. Already there they are preparing for the Senate strategy, as they call it here at the White House. We will see the president later today, about an hour or so, we're told, with many of those same House Democrats we just saw on Capitol Hill. They will make the argument that this is a Republican vote, largely a Republican vote to evict from the White House a president twice elected by the American people. The president himself, we're told, will appeal that it's time to end all this, time not to carry this over to the Senate for a trial that could last 4, 5, or 6 months. He will once again make an appeal for a bipartisan compromise and leave it to the Democratic House members to be much more partisan and essentially accuse the Republicans of trying to undo the last 2 presidential elections. Most of all, though, right now, as people inside the White House watch these screens, a realization that their president, the man they work for, now the 2nd president in the history of the United States to be impeached by the House of Representatives.
John King, let's look at this tote board now and analyze the White House effort to try to sway moderates. Right now, the vote stands at 219-4. And on the no side, 5 Republicans sided with the Democrats. Looking closer at the Democratic column, 199 Democrats voting against impeachment, of course, brought 5 Democrats crossing over to the Republicans.
This has broken down just as the vote counters in both parties had predicted it would in these last 72 hours, as the undecideds have made their views more clear. Democrats said they would lose 5, no more than 7 votes. It looks like they will be right in that margin. Republicans said they would lose 5, no more than 7 votes. So very strictly a party line vote here. That will help the Democratic argument. The White House says that this is a Republican push to impeach this president and remove him from office. The climate tends to be much different in the Senate, a much less partisan atmosphere. Although this debate has polarized both parties in Washington, we know one of the reasons the First Lady was invited by the Democrats to come to Capitol Hill this morning was to urge Democrats to support her husband, try to keep the number of Democratic defections to a minimum. We're told by our sources that at one point during the caucus, she recalled her own experience working for the Watergate Impeachment Committee, said that that process was a lot more fair than this one, and one congressman quoted the First Lady, said, quote, "We can't let them impeach our ideas." So certainly the First Lady of the United States casting this as a battle pitting her husband and the Democrats against the Republicans.
There are, as you can see by this tally, 2 Democrats not voting. We can tell you very quickly who they are. Representative George Miller of California is recovering from hip replacement surgery. He's not there to make the vote. And Representative Tom Allen of Maine has a somewhat more pleasant conflict. His daughter's getting married. So 2 Democrats not casting a vote. But you take those votes away, and as Bernie and John are just commenting, the Republicans have prevailed 228 to 205, with 5 Democrats voting with the Republicans and 5 Republicans voting with the Democrats. Wolf Blitzer.
Judy, our colleague Chris Black has just spoken with Joe Lockhart, the White House press secretary, who says he will absolutely have no comment on this vote to impeach President Clinton. He's going to wait until President Clinton himself addresses us, presumably in the next hour or so, when the Democratic House leadership gather here at the White House for this event. The president is now in the residence behind me. Presumably he was watching. We don't know for sure, but we will have to wait to hear from the president directly to get his reaction to this historic moment.
Wolf Blitzer at the White House. Jeff Greenfield and Professor Michael Gerhardt.
Take a look at these numbers and realize the fundamental reason that we're here today. If 12 more Republicans, according to these numbers, had changed their votes, the impeachment Article 1 would have failed by 1 vote. It was the White House's belief all along that they could get Northeastern Republicans, some of the people who openly expressed doubt about impeachment, and the fact that only 5 Republicans went over is the basic reason why the President of the United States now stands impeached. It was a fundamental miscalculation about where these moderate Republicans might wind up.
Let's listen to Ray LaHood announce the result.
To reconsider is laid upon the table. The question is on the adoption of Article 2. So many... The House will be in order. The question is on adoption of Article 2. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I demand the yeas and nays.
All in favor, the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. This will be a 15-minute vote by electronic device on Article 2.
What the members will now commence to vote on is Article 2 of these 4 articles of impeachment. This is the article that states the president provided perjurious, false, and misleading testimony as part of the Paula Jones civil rights action brought before him. Specifically, it says the president that he provided this testimony in the Paula Jones case with his responses to written questions and in his deposition. And before I go to Bob Franken, I want to make a correction and an apology. I was going by a report we had from last night that said that Representative Tom Allen of Maine was going to be attending his daughter's wedding. I am now told that he was here to vote. Instead, presumably the wedding was postponed, or maybe he's not there. Bob Franken.
Well, the one article of impeachment that's being voted on now is considered one of the weaker ones. It's going to be interesting to see if this prevails. Article 1, the one that just passed, was considered the strongest charge against President Clinton because it had to do with lying before the grand jury under oath. Article 2 has to do with perjury committed in the pursuit of the Paula Jones case, and there you run into the question of materiality, and I'll leave it to Michael to explain that from Black's Law Dictionary, but of course it's based on the fact that the Paula Jones case was ultimately dismissed, and the argument would be that because of that, the perjury was not as easy to prove, not as serious. It'll be most interesting to see if this one prevails and if the fourth article prevails. Those are the two weaker ones.
Well, clearly Michael Gerhardt is more than able and willing and ready to explain that if you so choose. And then I have an historical question for you.
Okay, well thanks for your confidence, Bob. The question of materiality essentially boils down to the following, that the testimony or the lying under oath would have been material if it could have affected or would have affected the outcome of the case. That's the test of materiality.
Historically speaking, I'm thinking that 130 years ago, no radios, no television, few newspapers. It took weeks for people to learn of impeachment here in Washington, and here, zap, around the world. The whole world knows it.
Well, yes, although, to be fair, people certainly did pay a lot of attention to the Johnson impeachment trial, or I should say the House's action with respect to President Johnson, and it was covered thoroughly in all the newspapers. Although I think we should note a couple differences. One of the critical differences is that President Johnson was enormously unpopular. And in fact, the people of the United States, by and large, favored his impeachment, and that gave his impeachment proceedings a whole different dynamic than the one we see before us.
You're already seeing, as we keep an eye on the tally board, a few more Republicans appear to be voting against this article than voted against Article 1. You had 5 Republicans voting against Article 1 at this point, and the vote is only not even halfway through, only a few minutes underway. Already 12 Republicans are casting a vote against.
Well, this is the point that, if you remember, if you were watching the House Judiciary Committee, when Lindsey Graham, a conservative of South Carolina, was the one party member of either party to break ranks when he voted against Article 2 for the reasons basically that Michael Gerhardt has outlined. The judge dismissed the case, said that Clinton's testimony wasn't material in any event, and it just seemed to some people on the Republican side weaker than the no questions asked line in front of a grand jury where there's no question about the importance of that. So we've already now have 16 Republicans who have broken ranks and are voting against this article, and this one, this one may well fail.
And to remind everyone, of course, the obvious, it only takes one article of impeachment passed by the House for a sitting president to be impeached, and President Clinton has been so impeached.
And to trigger a trial in the United States Senate. Bernie, we might note that the language in these articles is pretty rough. I'm just rereading here part of this article in which it says, and in violation of its constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has willfully corrupted and manipulated the judicial process of the United States for his personal gain and exoneration, impeding the administration of justice.
Are you going to take it?
Quickly now to Baghdad, correspondent Christiane Amanpour.
We're hearing now anti-aircraft artillery fire from close to our positions here in Baghdad. We have not heard what we would have expected to have heard, and that is the sound of incoming attacks. We're simply hearing, over the last few minutes, anti-aircraft artillery opening up in various parts of this city, and we can see the sky fairly lit up with the sight of tracer bullets. The red you can see there, or you can see the sparklings on your night scope camera that we're broadcasting. We have, as I said, just hearing the sound of outgoing fire and not incoming. We are not sure whether there will be any sustained attack like there was last night and the previous nights on Baghdad, but we can say that the Iraqis here are responding in any event to something with their anti-aircraft guns.
Christiane, Christian, what can you tell us about the Iraqi government through its vice president a short while ago indicating that Iraq regards UNSCOM as finished, done?
Well, the Vice President, Ramadan, gave a very, very impassioned and angry press conference in which he was asked about UNSCOM, the Weapons Inspection Commission, and he said the issue of UNSCOM, quote, is now in the past. And I quote again, the Commission of Spies is now in the past. Anti-aircraft artillery again, as you heard. He also said that Iraq will resist, quote, to the last citizen to defend its land, its policy, and its dignity. Now, interestingly, he also did admit that the attacks on Iraq have cut communications from the southern part of Iraq to the capital, Baghdad. And this is what he reported. And this is why, apparently, one of the reasons why the leadership of Iraq, before the war started, the day of the air attacks, announced that they had divided Iraq into 4 regional commands, putting loyal lieutenants in charge of each of those regions so that they would be able to independently take care of what they called any resistance or any internal uprisings and disturbances. Internal security, they termed that as. What is also interesting is that we have heard over the last few hours from the British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who announced also that British Tornadoes, the British fighter bombers, are in action against targets in Iraq today. And he said that they have been hitting Republican Guard facilities in southern Iraq, Republican Guard being the elite forces of the Iraqi regime that are now considered to be one of the key arms of keeping this government in power. And also, according to the United States and Britain, not only do they keep this government in office, but, quote, they have their own systems of repression and that they are instrumental in putting together the means of concealing the weapons of mass destruction. These are the words of the British Prime Minister Tony Blair. They are emphasizing, the British, that the Republican Guard is a key target. Now, even though the U.S. officials are saying that the objective of this military attack is not to destabilize the Iraqi regime, clearly by hitting the Republican Guard, and we've heard from the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Henry Shelton, that barracks have been hit certainly around Baghdad, that there is an element clearly of going after the elite troops that are considered to be those that keep this government in power and that are part of the protection that this government relies on. So this is going to be very interesting to watch and see how it develops. The Iraqi Vice President Ramadan said that in his press conference that there had been civilian casualties, again I quote, 10 times higher than military casualties, although he gave no figures. And that's the latest from here, Bernie.
Okay, Christian, we're going to keep the picture that we're getting, the live picture from you and our troops and the CNN journalists in Baghdad, and come back to follow what is happening on the House floor before we go to our military advisor, General Richard Neal, the retired Marine Corps general, because we want to put a couple questions to him about something that Christian just reported. Jeff Greenfield and Michael Gerhardt, it looks like Article 2 is going to go down. Why?
Well, for one thing, 24 Republicans have broken ranks and are voting against Article 2. I think they heard Lindsey Graham, or they followed their own notion this was a relatively weak case. Only 5 Democrats, the same 5 presumably that voted for Article 1, we'll find out later, voted for Article 2. And there are two, the reason that we talked about earlier is this is a weaker case. The second thing is, if you want to be political about it, this provides some cover for Republicans who can say, look, I'm not a relentless partisan. I voted against an article I thought was weak. The third and most ironic part, of course, is without the Paula Jones case in the first case, there would have been no deposition, there would have been no subsequent grand jury testimony. And now they have decided that the original Paula Jones case deposition is too weak to support an article of impeachment, but he's impeached anyway because of what he did in the grand jury.
And just to follow that up, one should not lose sight of the fact that we're in the midst of a political proceeding. And so the articles don't have to be, the votes on the articles don't have to be consistent. As Jeff pointed out, the first article does make reference to false statements made in the Paula Jones case. Nevertheless, the votes here seem to be against the second article. And so we see a kind of compromise being made by most members of the House with respect to this second article.
The point you just made about this article giving Republicans cover, Correspondent John King at the White House also dittos that, and the point being the Republicans can say that this is not just about sex.
Well, that's right. By the way, the Article 2 has now failed. There are now 220 votes recorded against it. 25 Republicans voted against it. Only 5 Democrats voting for it. And it is indeed a way of saying, look, we told you that we weren't just talking about sex. So what he did in the Paula Jones case, we don't think he should be impeached for that. But when you get to a grand jury and you swear an oath, that is another way to say this is something that this is about the rule of law, not about some tawdry sexual matter. But I just have to observe very quickly that to realize the immense constitutional step we are taking from what was originally a case involving the governor of Arkansas and a $5 or $6 an hour employee is absolutely staggering.
Also staggering what is happening on the left side, the upper side of your television screen. About 8 minutes ago, correspondent Christian Amanpour, reporting live from Baghdad, noted that Iraqi anti-aircraft batteries came to life again. At one point in her report, there was a single shot fired from one of the batteries, obviously trying to hit something. And you can see from the tracers going up that things are still happening. We'll continue to monitor things there. General Richard Neal, Christian reported something that was very, very interesting. At a news conference earlier today, Baghdad time, Iraqi Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan said that the attacks have cut communications between southern Iraq and Baghdad. And Christian also quoted him as saying a bit later that civilian casualties are 10 times higher than military casualties. Your assessment?
Those are interesting figures that Christian gave us. Of course, there's no way that we can corroborate those figures and give them any validity, but I think there's something that has to make us all pause for concern. I think the United States and the British have told us on more than one occasion that they have really worked to the nth degree to try to avoid any collateral damage and more specifically, any civilian casualties. I think we're going to have to wait and sort that out as more data becomes available.
Would you expect, based on your sources, that any attacks tonight would be less intense than they were Friday night, Washington time?
I think what you'll see is probably less attacks in and around Baghdad. From my sources, I think they've felt that the forces have probably attacked all of the targets in that general vicinity to the satisfaction from a bomb damage assessment point of view. I think there's a lot more attacks going on either west, east, or south of Baghdad, and perhaps even north up near Tikrit. We don't pick them up on our monitor, but I can just see that from my discussions with some of these folks that there is still a full night's effort, although
Okay,
I think it'll be curtailed.
Can I ask a question, General Neal?
Yes, Christiane.
Can you tell us what we're hearing now increasingly from the British side and other reports coming out of the United States that in fact the Republican Guards are a main target? Can you tell us what you know about whether barracks are being hit, what is happening in terms of the Republican Guards and targeting them and targeting soldiers in their barracks, etc.?
I think, Christiane, you're right what you're hearing. I think there has been a focused effort on the Republican Guard forces. My speculation, or I'm assuming from my studies of the area, is that most likely the rationale behind hitting these barracks is, number one, obviously to deter them from protecting the regime. And at the same time, these are the best fed, best equipped, best housed troops. But they also are the ones that seem to suffer the attacks all the time whenever, in fact, we go to a war footing or the United States goes to a war footing. So I'm assuming that they may say perhaps they're going to try, it's turn the table, so to speak, and maybe the Republican guards, who are the strongest, maybe they could turn them against the regime.
They also are the best paid,
Is that
too.
a key objective?
Sorry, Christiane, please continue.
Is that a key objective, as far as you know, General Neal, what you just reported?
No, it's not speculation. It's not an objective. It's from my discussions with folks without them coming up and saying this is an objective. I think you've heard comments about wanting to replace the regime. The opposition parties out there, as you have reported and as we have reported over the last 3 or 4 days, are in sort of there's
On
3 or
this
4
vote, the yeas are 205, the nays are 229. Article